What if I told you that you can clone almost any website that you like in under a minute using AI without stealing code or breaking rules or doing anything sketchy? Because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how this works and how you can do the same thing for yourself using Base 44. Not just once, but over and over again for different sites, layouts, and ideas that you might want to build. Quick side note before anything or anyone freaks out, this is all legit. We're not stealing code here or copying files or ripping sites one for one. No, what's happening here is the AI looks at how a site is laid out and then how it works, and then it rebuilds its own version from scratch. Same idea as a designer seeing something cool and then recreating it in their own way, just a lot faster. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So before anything else here, we do need a tool that can take an idea and then turn it into something real, really fast. The task here is pretty straightforward. We're supposed to take an existing website and then recreate it as a working application, not just a visual mockup. And that's where Base 44 comes in, because Base 44 lets you describe what you want in plain English, and then it generates a live web app with the backend, the database, and hosting already handled for you. There's no setup phase and no technical translation in between. The moment the app is generated, it's usable right away. So for what we're about to do, that matters. We're not testing design theory or wireframing. We want to see how much of a real website can be recreated just by explaining it and how close the result gets without any manual work. So for this video's demo, we're going to give Base 44 a real website and let it build the app from a single prompt. Then we'll look at what it produces and how far it actually goes. Let's take a quick look here at the site we're about to copy so that we're clear on what the end goal is. This is the Wheel of Names. It's a simple party and event tool where users enter a list of names and then spin a wheel to randomly just select one. There's nothing hidden or complex here, which makes it a good test case. So now visually here, as you can see, the layout is straightforward. The main focus is the wheel here in the center with a colorful gradient background that gives it a playful vibe. On the right side, there's a panel where users can add and edit and manage a list of names that then gets loaded into the wheel. Functionally, everything revolves around that interaction. You type in some names, spin the wheel, and then the app handles the random selection with animations and sound effects. No accounts, no onboarding, just a focus tool that does one thing really well. This is exactly the kind of site that looks simple on the surface, but still requires real logic to work properly. So now that we're clear on what the site does and how it's structured, let's see how Base 44 handles cloning it from a single prompt. So now let's give Base 44 the prompt and then let it do its thing. All we're asking here is to clone the site and then include all of its features. Just a single request with the website link. And as soon as we submit it, Base 44 starts working right away. As you can see here on your screen, you can watch it process the site in real time, breaking down the layout, the colors, and pretty much how everything functions, and then putting the app together piece by piece. The speed is what really stands out here. In about 3 minutes or so, the whole site is basically there for us. The layout, styling, functionality, all generated without me having to touch a single line of code. And by the time it is done, we're already looking at a live app that we can click through and test immediately. All right, so now that the clone's done, this is where you would normally expect things to kind of get annoying. Things like tweaking colors and fixing layout stuff and figuring out how to change anything without breaking it. So instead, I'm just going to tell it what I want. I want the background to be more vibrant, to lean into a gradient, and then give my users more customization options. And that's it. So I drop that into the prompt and let it go. And you can see it update almost right away. The colors pop a lot more, the whole page feels more alive, and it already looks closer to something that you'd actually ship instead of just a copy. What I like here is how casual the interaction is. If something feels off, you don't have to stop and then rethink your setup. You just say what you want, change, and then move on. No tools, no menus, no code edits. You react, you adjust, and then you just keep on going. And that's basically the workflow here. All right, so the last step, let's actually make it live. In Base 44, publishing is basically just one click. You hit publish, and it doesn't just save the project, it actually gives you a real link you can open right away. So once it's published, we copy the URL, open it in a new tab, and there it is, the same site, but now it's running as a live app on the web. There's no hosting setup, no domain configuration, no extra steps in the background. At this point, it's not sitting inside some editor anymore. It's a working, shareable website that you can actually send to someone and they can use it immediately. All right, so before we keep going here, there is something we need to talk about. Because at this point, a lot of you there at home are probably thinking the same thing I was. Okay, this looks cool and all, but are there other AI tools that can do this too? And yeah, that is a fair question. There are a lot of platforms out there making big promises about website cloning. So instead of dodging that question, let's just go ahead and address it head on. So what I'm going to do next is break things down in a really simple, no BS way. I'm going to compare the tools that people actually talk about and use based on the things that genuinely matter when your goal is to clone a website fast and get something usable out of it. So to keep this clean and objective as possible, I'm using a report card system. Every tool gets scored on these same 5 criteria, and everything adds up to 100 points. So here's what actually matters. Cloning speed is the first thing we care about. How fast can you go from seeing a website to having a working clone right in front of you? Because if this takes hours, you might as well just learn to code. And this category is worth 30 points. Accuracy to the original is next. How close does the clone actually look compared to the site that we're copying? Layout, colors, spacing, structure. If it looks nothing like what we wanted, then what's the whole point? And this one is worth 25 points. Functionality is where a lot of tools fall apart. Can it clone interactive elements like forms and buttons or even basic animations? Or are you just getting something that looks good but doesn't actually work? A pretty picture is not enough here, and this category is worth 20 points. Ease of use is about how technical you need to be. If you need a computer science degree just to make it work, then it's not for most people, and that's 15 points. And finally, of course, is price. Not just whether it's cheap, but what you actually get for your money. Some tools charge $50 a month just to get started, which matters a lot if you're testing ideas, and this one is worth 10 points. Put all of those together and the maximum score any tool can receive is 100 points. Now we can actually see which tools hold up and which ones sound good on paper but actually fall apart when you try to use them. And we'll start with the cloning speed of Framer. There's no quick clone option at all. You're just dropped straight into a blank canvas here, which means everything has to be built manually from the ground up. Every section needs to be recreated piece by piece. Even using Framer's pre-built sections, progress is slow. I time myself while doing this, and just setting up the navigation alone already took about 15 minutes. And that's even before touching layout and polish and animations or even functionality. So while Framer can produce beautiful designs, no doubt, when it comes to cloning speed, it's just not built for fast turnarounds or instant results. The results can look great, but this is very much a you'll be here all weekend kind of situation, which is why for Framer, I'm giving it 12 out of 30 for cloning speed. Next up is accuracy to the original, and to be fair, Framer can be extremely accurate. If you look at Framer's gallery, you'll see plenty of polished sites that match their inspiration almost perfectly. But here's the catch. Those results come from people who really know what they're doing here. there's a big gap between expert level Framer builds and then what most beginners end up with. And without strong design knowledge, you're usually not cloning a site, you're just getting inspired by it. And most beginners lean heavily on templates and pre-built sections, which do help, but it also means that the final result often drifts away from the original. Matching spacing, typography, layout balance, and visual hierarchy takes real design skill, not just dragging blocks into a canvas. So while Framer can be pixel perfect in the right hands, that's a big if, and that's why I'll give it a score of 20 out of 25. For functionality replication, Framer is very much kind of a mixed bag. On the surface, it looks impressive as usual. Smooth animations, clean transitions, and polished micro interactions are easy to achieve. And that shows clearly when looking at professional Framer sites. But once you move past those visuals, the limitations, they show up fast. Framer doesn't support backend functionality. There are no true database connections, no built-in user authentication, and no actual logic running behind the scenes. So what you're building here is still just a front-end experience, and anything more advanced than that, dynamic data, user accounts, or real interactions, those require custom code components. And that's why for functionality replication, Framer lands at 12 out of 20. For ease of use, Framer is where a lot of people hit friction really fast. Because the interface here, as you can see, is packed with layers, components, and variants and overrides, and even simple changes often require knowing where everything lives. And that's manageable if you're already a designer, but for beginners, it's overwhelming almost immediately because basic tasks end up forcing you to understand design systems and how components are structured, even when all you want is a simple layout tweak. And to really finish a project cleanly, you need to understand component architecture, not just drag and dropping elements around. So unless you already have design experience, this can get frustrating quickly. So for this one, I'm gonna give it a score of 8 out of 15. Now Framer looks cheap too, until you factor in your time and your sanity. The free plan forces Framer branding and a Framer subdomain, which already makes it unusable for anything professional. To even get a custom domain, you have to upgrade, and realistically here you're looking at around 20 bucks a month just to unlock basic features, and closer to $35 a month if you need CMS functionality that most real projects rely on. But the bigger cost isn't the subscription, it's the time. Even a simple site can take around 8 hours to put together, which at a conservative $25 an hour already puts you around $200 deep per clone. And at that point, you're not far off from what people pay designers to build the same thing for them. Once you combine the subscription upgrades with all that time investment, the value drops really fast. So I'm going to score Framer a 6 out of 10 on price. And then we put all the scores together. We're talking cloning speed, accuracy, functionality, ease of use, and price. Framer lands at a total score of 58 out of 100. So let's go ahead and take a look at Replit and how it handles cloning speed. On the surface, it looks pretty fast. The agent spins up code in a few minutes, and in this case, around 4 minutes only, and you do get something on your screen fairly quickly. But that is only the first step. What actually follows next is a loop. Generate, review, find an error, fix it, regenerate, and repeat. In the video, you can already see issues showing up right after the first generation here, which is a pretty common Replit experience. Most first attempts land at about 60% correct, meaning you almost always need multiple rounds to get something usable. And then once you factor in debugging and a bunch of back and forth prompts, the full process usually stretches into 2 to 3 hours. So while Replit is fast to generate, it's slow to get it right. And that's why it scores 15 out of 30 for cloning speed. And when it comes to accuracy, Replit is technically capable, but it is inconsistent. The structure is usually there, the layouts of sections and basic logic often resemble the original site itself, but the visual results can swing a lot depending on how the prompt is written. Using the exact same prompt more than once does not guarantee the same outcome. And here you can see that running the same request twice produces noticeably different designs. Sometimes it's really close. Other times it kind of drifts enough that you'd have to step in and then correct it manually. Replit understands code structure well, no doubt, but it struggles with design nuance. Things like spacing and visual balance and overall polish aren't consistently handled, which makes accurate cloning unreliable unless you're willing to guide it pretty heavily. So while it can get you technically close, the inconsistently kind of holds it back. So I'm going to give Replit a score of 18 out of 25 for accuracy to the original. So this is where Replit actually shines when it works. Using the prompt to lock the app behind a login system, Replit was able to generate real authentication with signup and login flows, backed by an actual database. Once built, the app stops being just a front end and becomes a true full stack application, which is something most cloning tools can't handle at all. Forms connect properly here, user accounts, those persist, and backend logic is in place. Replit can also handle API integrations and a lot more complex functionality directly through chat prompts, which gives it a lot of power if you know how to guide it. Now that said, responsive behavior and polish depend heavily on how specific your prompts are. If you don't spell it out, things can break or behave unexpectedly. Still, when it lands well. So here Replit earns a score of 16 out of 20. Let's talk about ease of use. This is where Replit starts to lose a lot of people. When something breaks, and it does eventually, you're dropped straight into real error messages and stack traces. And you can see here on your screen that logging in triggered an error, and the only way forward was opening up the console and figuring out what went wrong. And at this point, you're not just prompting anymore, you're reviewing generated code that you may or may not understand, and then understand what it's doing and then fixing it manually if the AI can't. And if you don't have at least some coding knowledge, this part becomes frustrating very fast. I've been there. You'll also find plenty of Reddit threads from users talking about setup issues and debugging loops and spending way more time fixing problems and building features. So while Replit is powerful, it's still very much a developer tool. You are still coding, just with an AI assistant next to you. And that's why it lands at a 5 out of 15 for ease of use. Pricing is where Replit starts to split people into two camps. On paper, it does look reasonable here. There is a free tier, but it's extremely limited, of course. Very little compute time, temporary apps, public-only projects, and barely enough room to test anything meaningfully. It's fine for just poking around, not for actually building. The core plan comes at about $20 per month, which includes $25 worth of usage credits. The problem is how fast those credits burn. Every iteration costs you generating code, fixing all of those errors, rerunning the agent, and then deploying again. And when debugging kicks in, you can literally watch your credits disappear. Power users regularly report spending hundreds per month once projects get a lot more complex, especially when the AI loops or needs multiple retries to get something right. In some cases even, you're paying just to correct mistakes the agent made in the first place. So if you're already a developer and you know how to move efficiently, the pricing can make sense. But if you're just cloning sites here, experimenting or debugging heavily, costs add up fast. So let's give this a 7 out of 10 for price, bringing its total score to 61 out of 100. Now let's take a look at Lovable, starting with cloning speed. When Lovable works, it's genuinely fast. Using the same prompt, it can turn out a full site in under just 2 minutes, And when everything lines up, well, as you can see, the results feel impressive almost immediately. Speed is clearly one of its stronger traits. The trade-off here is consistency. Lovable has a bit of generation lottery going on. Sometimes the first output is nearly perfect, and then other times things come out slightly off and you end up regenerating a few more times to get something actually usable. Now, realistically here, you're often looking at 3 or maybe 4 attempts before it really clicks. And that combination of very fast generation but uneven first pass results is why Lovable lands at 22 out of 30 for cloning speed. Impressive when it does hit, but it's not always a one and done kind of thing. Next up is accuracy to the original. When Lovable hits, again, it actually does a solid job capturing the overall look and intent of the site. In the video, you can see several successful clones that clearly feel like the original project at a glance. The layout, the structure, and general vibe, those are all there. Now, where it falls short is in the details. Small things like spacing being slightly off, colors not matching exactly, or minor layout inconsistencies that do tend to creep in on you. And it usually gets you about 80% of the way there. But that last 20% still takes manual cleanup if you care about polish. And because of that, it lands at 19 out of 25 for accuracy. Strong results overall, but not quite pixel perfect without extra effort. For functionality, Lovable handles the basics really well. It can turn a simple site into a CMS-style app with working forms, navigation, authentication, and responsive layouts that adapt across different screen sizes. And you can see this clearly once the Wheel of Names app is rebuilt as a dashboard-style application. And then where it falls short is more with complex features. Advanced dashboards, deeper logic, or custom workflows, for example, can be hit or miss, and often they do take multiple prompts. Post-generation editing is also limited, so you're mostly working with whatever it gives you. And because of that, it lands at 15 out of 20. Solid fundamentals here, but I wouldn't expect anything fancy. As for ease of use, it's one of Lovable's strongest points. The interface is just a chat box. You describe what you want in plain language and it responds. There's no complex UI involved, no layers, no components to manage. And that said, there is a learning curve around prompting. You still need to learn how to phrase your requests clearly and break features into smaller steps and be specific when things get more complex. But once you get that rhythm, it is pretty smooth, but it takes a bit of trial and error to get there. Overall, it's fair to give this 12 out of 15. Finally, something that actually speaks human. Lovable's pricing is honestly pretty fair for what you get. The free tier gives you daily credits with access to core features, which means you can actually test and build instead of hitting a paywall all the time immediately. And that alone puts it ahead of a lot of our tools. For regular use, the Pro plan sits at $25 a month or cheaper if you go annual, and the credits are straightforward. You can see exactly what each prompt costs. Unused credits, those roll over, and there are no surprise charges lurking in the background. Now, if you need more, pricing does scale predictably instead of jumping to some massive enterprise number. All things considered, I give it an 8 out of 10 on price. It's fair, it's transparent, and it is reasonable for creators who want to move fast without guessing what the bill will look like. And that brings Lovable's total score to 76 out of 100. So now let's look at the cloning speed of base 44. Let's prompt it to clone a complex SaaS landing page, Hostinger, and the results come back almost immediately. The first generation was already close to a one-to-one clone here and genuinely production ready. What really stands out is that there's no iteration loop here. While other tools are still loading, regenerating, or fixing errors, base 44 is already done. You can see this clearly when the same prompt is run on multiple platforms. Base 44 finishes while the others are still working through their first pass. Even when cloning different sites, the pattern stays the same here. Each build lands in under a couple of minutes, consistently, without needing extra prompts or cleanup. And that's why this feels like instant gratification in the best way possible. For cloning speed, I'm going to give Base 44 a 28 out of 30. It's fast, it's consistent, and it's built for momentum. Next up is accuracy. When you put the clones side by side with the original sites, the resemblance isn't just a surface level. The layouts, those line up, the spacing feels right, and the overall structure matches almost exactly. I like how well it picks up on the small stuff too, like the gradients and the shadows, the padding, typography, the visual hierarchy. All of those details that usually fall apart with AI-generated clones are largely intact here. And as you scroll through the generated site, it's clear that Base 44 understands the design intent behind them. It also does a solid job recognizing the type of website it's cloning and applying the right patterns automatically, whether that's a SaaS landing page or a more content-heavy layout. And that level of accuracy earns Base 44 a 23 out of 25. It's not just close, but impressively faithful to the source. Next, we're looking at functionality replication. Basically, whether the clone site can do more than just sit there and look good. And this is where most tools start to fall apart. But Base 44 actually holds up pretty well. So let's use a single prompt to expand the clone into a real app by changing the branding here, adding some working forms, and then setting up a proper login and sign up flow. After logging in, we're taken to a real dashboard. User accounts are stored, data persists, and everything behaves the way a real application would. Our forms submit correctly, navigation works, and the app feels connected instead of just patched together. It also handles mobile responsiveness without any extra effort from us. The layout adapts cleanly across screen sizes, it loads fast, and it does stay usable on smaller devices too. On top of that, Base 44 can generate dashboards and tables and structured layouts that actually make sense for real use. And because it goes beyond just the visuals and delivers real working functionality, Base 44 deserves an 18 out of 20 for functionality replication. Next up is ease of use, and this is probably the most obvious win here. There's no setup phase here at all. You don't have to configure anything. You just have to type, and I literally just asked it to make the site look like Stripe's dashboard, and that was enough for it. The layout changed, the structure did make sense, and it picked up the style immediately without me needing to explain what Stripe's design language even is. Same thing also when I asked it to add a form to the front of the dashboard. One sentence in, that's it, and the feature is done. And you're not thinking about how things are built here. You're not touching components or layouts. You're just basically describing what you want to see on the screen, and it fills in the gaps for you. So that's why I'm giving it a 14 out of 15 for ease of use. If you can describe the idea in plain language, Base 44 can turn it into something real. So now let's talk about price, because this is where Base 44 really stands out. Even on the free plan here, you're not limited to just a demo or a stripped down version. You can build real applications with authentication, a database, analytics, and enough credits to still properly test things before spending anything. The paid plan comes in at $20 a month, and that unlocks unlimited projects with full features. Hosting, backend, database, and authentication are already included, so there's no need to juggle extra services or surprise upgrades just to keep an app running. And when you look at what this replaces, developer costs in the thousands or months spent learning frameworks, well, the value is kind of hard to ignore. You're trading complexity and time for speed and output. Because of that, Base 44 earns 9 out of 10 on price. And when you add that to its speed, accuracy, functionality, and ease of use, it ends up with a total score of 92 out of 100. This is definitely the clear standout in this entire lineup. And this is the part that most people don't immediately realize. So I'm going to tell you right now, tools like this change who gets to build. If you're an entrepreneur, you no longer have to wait on a dev timeline just to see if an idea makes sense. If you're working with clients, you can show something to them that's real and interactive instead of just screenshots and verbal promises. And if you're learning, this turns websites from black boxes into something you can actually explore and understand. It's not just about cloning pages here, but more about making web creation a lot faster, more accessible, and a lot less intimidating for everyone else. But if you want this to really actually work for you, how you approach it does matter. Small changes in how you prompt or structure things can be the difference between something that feels finished and something that needs like 10 more passes. So be clear when you write prompts, call out the layout that you want, mention that it should be responsive, and describe the visual style up front. The more specific that we are, the less back and forth that we're going to need later on. On the legal side, keep it simple. Use other sites for inspiration, not duplication. Don't copy logos, text word for word, or branding. And always make sure the final version is your own original project. And this approach shines when speed matters. It's ideal for rapid prototyping, learning how strong websites are structured, and building MVPs or client demos that actually work instead of living in Figma. So at this point, you've seen the whole picture now. We didn't cherry pick examples or rely on theory. No, we cloned real sites, we tested real functionality, and we compared tools head to head. And the gap is pretty clear, at least it is to me. Base 44 isn't just faster. It also removes entire layers of friction that normally slow this process down. If you've ever wanted to turn an idea, a layout you like, or a reference site into something real without spinning up a full dev workflow, this is the time to try it now. Open up Base 44, drop in a site, and then start building. That first successful clone will change how you think about what's possible today. And I'll be back with deeper builds and more advanced workflows soon. So thank you for now for investing your time with me today, and I'll see you at the next one.